Hi, I'm Sweatt-Eldredge, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And today we're going to be talking about self-care for the real world. I've really noticed that there's so many misconceptions about what self-care is that can make it seem overly indulgent or somewhat unattainable. And so I really want to give us a grounded vision of what it looks like to care and nurture ourselves in our day-to-day lives. So let's go ahead and get started. Allow me to formally introduce myself. So hi, I'm Sweatt-Eldredge, and I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas. I'm in private practice at Memorial Heights Counseling. I'm all online right now, so please visit my website at www.memorialheightscounseling.com if you want to contact me for more information or if you're interested in booking an appointment. As a therapist, I think about self-care every day, both because of the conversations I have with my clients, but also because I am a human trying to do my best to live a healthy and fulfilling life. Over the years of listening to the stories and experiences of my clients, I've developed more and more of an understanding about what self-care looks like, not just in theory, but in practice, in the real world. So let's get started, shall we? Today, we're going to talk about 4 different things when it comes to self-care. First of all, we're going to talk about why we need self-care. We're also going to talk about what self-care is. It's really important to me that we get a foundational understanding of what it means to practice self-care. We're also going to talk about what self-care isn't. Like I mentioned earlier, there's just so many misconceptions about self-care that make it seem like a challenge or something indulgent, and we really want to clear that up today. And additionally, we're going to talk about why it matters in particular for helpers, anyone who's offering care to other people or trying to do some good in the world. And so we're going to talk about all of those things today. So let's start with this. Why do we need self-care? Let's be real, we've got a huge self-care problem. You may have noticed over the past few years, but we are getting more depressed and anxious than ever before. This is something I certainly see clinically, and I've seen exponentially happening over the past year, especially since the pandemic began. And I think you probably would either have an experience of this with yourself or maybe with people that you love, that as a world, as a society, it seems like we're just having a really rough time with our mental health. Additionally, it's not just that we're having mental health problems in increasing ways, we're also having physical health problems. We aren't treating our bodies with respect, and we have so many health-related issues. There's research that says that this current generation may be the first to not have as high of life expectancy than their parents. And that's because we're not treating our bodies with respect. We're often overloaded, we're overly busy, we're moving quickly from one thing to another, and we're choosing convenience over caring for our physical selves. We're also more stressed and overloaded. Our American culture in particular, we base our worth on what we can produce. We highly, highly value productivity. And there is almost this cult of busyness. We brag about how busy we are, and we wear that like a badge of honor. But because of that, we're so stressed and overloaded, and being stressed has become a default state instead of something that happens periodically or once in a while that we learn to manage. Because of all of this, we're burning out at historic rates. And this one really bothers me. We aren't even taking our vacation days. If you look at American culture in particular, we know that workers who have their PTO aren't using it. And this is just so sad, because that'd be such a wonderful time to connect with family, connect with friends, get some good sleep in, explore, play, and we're not doing that because we're choosing busyness and productivity over our own well-being, and that's really creating some problems for us. And here's the thing though, everybody needs some self-care. We know from research that self-care protects our mental health. It reduces that experience of depression and anxiety. I believe that when we're caring for ourselves, that that shows us that we are worthy. If we are treating ourselves with care and respect, then we start to believe that we are worth caring for and we are worthy of respect and love. And I think that that just has an enormous impact on our mental health, especially in terms of our experience of depression. It also reduces stress and burnout, and there's such a huge connection between our experience of stress and our physical well-being. There's a huge connection between stress and heart disease, stroke, cancer, all sorts of things like that. So this is really something important. We want to monitor those stress levels so that we can be healthier in our day-to-day lives. Also, stress is not a fun experience. It doesn't feel like a meaningful experience. It's often something that can really shake us to our core, and I don't think it's something that anyone enjoys in their life. Burnout is something too that creates so many challenges that people will often start on a path that feels so meaningful and fulfilling, and along the way they realize that they don't have enough fuel in their tank to meet their goals like they wanted to, and that can often be a profoundly challenging experience. It can cut us to our core. It can challenge our systems of meaning making, and so burnout is something that we really want to avoid if we possibly can. Also, self-care improves our focus and concentration. I'm going to be talking a lot about sleep today because it is, I think, probably the most basic and fundamental and maybe even important aspect of practicing self-care. And I want you to think about a night when you didn't sleep well. Maybe you woke up in the middle of the night. Maybe you're stressed about something, and so you wake up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and you're just thinking about the proposal that you have to work on the next day at the office. And then because of that, you don't get the sleep you need. And then imagine yourself after maybe just getting 4 or 5 hours of really disrupted sleep the night before, then going to work and trying to work on that project or proposal. It is incredibly hard to focus and concentrate on the things that matter. And so self-care can really help us fulfill our goals. It can help us do the things that we want to do. Also, it minimizes those more negative feelings. All feelings are fine to have. There's no such thing as a bad feeling, but there's certainly some that are uncomfortable, that don't feel super great to experience. I'd say things like sadness, anger, frustration, really normal feelings. But if we can minimize those, that would be really wonderful. And it also maximizes those more positive feelings. It leaves room in our life for happiness, joy, fulfillment, and contentment. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what we're all trying to do. Additionally, basic self-care helps increase our energy levels. So if you're worried about being productive, one of the best ways to be highly productive is to practice self-care. And so we really got the cart before the horse whenever we sacrifice our self-care on the altar of productivity. We can increase our energy and ultimately have a better output if we take good care of ourselves. Additionally, like I mentioned earlier, self-care has such an important impact on our physical health. If we are just running through life from one task to another, and we aren't pausing to take care of our bodies, we aren't pausing to be thoughtful about eating foods that give us energy and vitality, if we aren't moving our bodies, and if we're stressed out all the time, that has such a huge impact on our physical experience. And so we really need self-care to make sure that we're operating, that we're loving our bodies, that we're treating them as though they're valuable, and that we're operating at a good level in our lives. Additionally, self-care can really improve our relationships because an important aspect of self-care is making time for connection and setting healthy and appropriate boundaries with others. And so being in a positive mental health state, having more energy, experiencing more positive emotions, all of those things, I hope you can connect those dots and see that that often creates room for more positive relationships with others, and that absolutely pays dividends in our lives. So I hope you can see we're not getting enough self-care, but it is so foundational for us to have a positive experience in our lives. So let's figure this out. What is self-care anyway? Like I said, there's so many misconceptions about self-care. And I think, unfortunately, because we were having these really good conversations about self-care, it's a term that's often been co-opted now as a marketing term. It's used to sell products that, don't even necessarily have anything to do with self-care. It's often used to justify all sorts of behaviors that have nothing to do with self-care. So I really want us to get on the same page here about what self-care is anyway. So self-care is offering ourselves care and nurture like a good parent or caregiver. Self-care is committing to and prioritizing meeting our basic needs. Self-care is maintaining healthy relationships and boundaries with others. Self-care is practicing self-compassion. And self-care is creating space in our life for joy. Now we're going to break all of these things down to get a really good idea of what it looks like to offer ourselves that care and nurture as we practice self-care. So let's try this together. I want you to ponder for just a moment, and I want you to think of someone that you would describe as an ideal and nurturing parent or caregiver. So this can be maybe someone in your own life who you've experienced as really caring and loving and wise. Or maybe if that's a little hard to do, you can think of maybe a character from a book or a movie or a TV show. Or maybe you can just even think of, how would I have wanted my parent or caregiver to be toward me? And I want you to imagine for a moment, how do they treat those in their care? Nurture means supplying with nourishment or helping something grow and develop in a caring and loving way. So I want to give you a moment to get that really powerful and clear image in your mind. Again, nurture means to supply with nourishment or to help something grow and develop in a caring and loving way. I love all of the hobbies that have popped up over the past year in the pandemic. And one of the things that I see all the time now is people who are absolutely nurturing and caring for houseplants. Goodness gracious, I see this all over Instagram. I have so many friends who are plant parents who take so much time and energy to care for these plants and their care. And I just think that that's a really beautiful thing. And I think that that's an image in some ways of what nurture looks like. I hope during that thought experiment, you thought of a nurturing figure, someone who is aware of needs and helps meet them in a compassionate way. So here's an example of what that nurturing caregiver might look like. Imagine it's 9 p.m. and you've been traveling all day in the car with your family and your kiddos. You're trying to make it home on time, you're rushing to get home, and so you haven't stopped for dinner or a pit stop in a while. And all of a sudden, your youngest child is crying in the backseat and screaming at their sibling. Now, in this moment, you're probably feeling a little irritated, but hopefully you can stay grounded enough to realize that these big feelings are needs that your child has. And so you turn down your music to offer a quieter environment for them to rest. And maybe you speak to them in soothing tones to help them calm down, saying things like, "Man, I know this is really hard, and we're so close to home." And then maybe you even pull several snacks out of your bag to help meet their needs, because you're aware that you're pushing them really hard to go without dinner by 9 p.m. What if we approach taking care of ourselves like a nurturing, caring, loving, and wise parent? What if we wondered when we're struggling, not what's wrong with us, but what needs we have that we need to meet? What if we are that loving and caring parent who sees their child melting down and calms them, soothes them, holds them, and pulls some snacks out of their purse? I think that could be a really, really powerful thing for all of us if we were nurturing ourselves in our daily life like that. So self-care is committing to and prioritizing our basic needs. And so some things I want you to think about, some questions I want you to ask yourself. Are you regularly feeding yourself nourishing foods when you're hungry? I hear about so many people who get so busy that they skip meals during the day. And I know myself, if I'm not careful, I can overschedule my client appointments and forget to build in a lunchtime. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm not as good of a therapist if I haven't eaten all day. So make sure you're not skipping meals. Remember, you need fuel to function. You need fuel to get the energy you need to do the kind of job that you want to do on a particular day. And also make sure that you're eating foods that provide energy and nutrition when possible. Not every meal is going to be the most health conscious, green, vegetable laden, plant-based, delicious, healthy meal that maybe it would be in an ideal world. But if you are only allowing enough room in your life for Whataburger drive-through every single day, and that's the only amount of time that you allot yourself for nurturing yourself through food, that may be something you need to think about. That it is a good thing to give your body the fuel and nutrition that it needs in order to be healthy and move forward. Are you treating your body with respect and care? Are you expecting your body to do more than you should expect it to do? Are you expecting it to work 20 hours a day and get 4 hours of sleep at night while subsisting on McDonald's and never moving from your desk? That's not treating your body with respect and care. Are you pushing past your pain points because you want to get something done? Are you listening to your body when it's sending you signals and telling you that maybe you need to rest or take a deep breath? Do you have some kind of movement routine in your life, whether that's going to the gym or just going for a walk? Are you moving your body and energizing it in that way? Are you caring for your body by practicing good hygiene? This may sound really basic, but I fully believe in the curative powers of brushing your teeth and taking a shower. And sometimes we get so busy that we neglect that or we put that off until the next day. And I promise you that you're going to feel more respected and cared for if you are respecting and caring for your body. And finally, are you getting enough sleep? We could have a whole presentation about the importance of sleep, but suffice to say that sleep is the axis around which our physical and mental health turns. And so if you find yourself in a place where you're struggling, the first question you should ask yourself is, am I getting enough sleep? For most humans, that's between 7 to 9 hours, really aiming for that 8. And so I want you to notice and think about, are you expecting to have the amount of energy that you would have with 8 hours, but only offering yourself 6 hours to sleep? Sleep is so incredibly important, and it is a way to honor your body and honor yourself. Self-care is also maintaining healthy relationships and boundaries with others. Here's the thing, we need connection. Having that sense of belonging is a basic human need, and it is so important. Community helps us thrive. And so having healthy boundaries, it looks like knowing when to say yes to relationships and knowing when to say no. And that is such a balance, right? Sometimes, I think especially after the pandemic, we've all become kind of antisocial homebodies. And I'm hearing more and more that there's some amount of social anxiety that most of us are feeling as we reemerge from our lockdown over the past year. And so a lot of people are struggling saying yes to social experiences or connecting with other people. But saying yes to those experiences can be so incredibly vital. It can be energizing and it can make us feel seen and connected. But also we need to say no sometimes too. In fact, we need to say no a lot of times. So sometimes we can practice self-care by saying, you know what, I would love to go and do this thing. I would love to help you in this area. I would love to show up in this way, but I need to honor my body. I need to honor myself. I need to honor my energy level by saying no instead. Ooh, this one's huge. Self-care is practicing self-compassion. This is another topic that I could go on and on and on about, and maybe even do a whole presentation about. And yet, somehow it only gets one slide today. So we're going to move through this really quickly, but I really want to encourage you to look into the work of Kristen Neff. She is a professor or researcher at UT in the School of Social Work, and she just does absolutely incredible work around this idea of self-compassion. And she's written just a wonderful book of the same name. And so I would really recommend you check that out. So basically what it looks like to practice self-compassion is to treat yourself with kindness like you would a good friend. And most of this practicing self-compassion is going to happen in our minds. Something I notice is that we are a lot meaner to ourselves in our own minds than we would ever be to a friend. I want you to think about how many times in your life you've called yourself an idiot in your own mind. That's probably a whole lot. And we would never say that to a friend. We would never, if a friend was stumbling or falling or struggling, we would never look at them and say, oh my gosh, you didn't finish what you thought you were going to finish today. What an idiot. You need to get it together. We would never say that. But for some reason, we think it's okay to talk to ourselves like that. So we really want to treat ourselves with that same kindness that we would offer a good friend. And we want to validate our emotions while remembering our goals and values. And so what that looks like is saying, yeah, today I'm really struggling. Today I've got some big feelings or some anxiety or some sadness or some frustration that I'm really dealing with. And that makes a lot of sense. And there's nothing wrong with that feeling. But also today I want to make sure that I move forward on this task or move forward in this particular way. And so even though those feelings are valid, I want to keep in mind that those feelings aren't in the driver's seat of my life. Another way we practice self-compassion is by remembering that you are human, just like everybody else. We are all human. We are all flawed. We all make mistakes. And what's so interesting is often our flaws make us feel isolated and alone, when really our flaws are the biggest indicator that we are just like everybody else. And so keeping in mind that you're human, I think that can connect us with other people. It can get us to a place of saying like, yeah, me too, instead of this feeling of isolation. Additionally, self-compassion looks like practicing mindful acceptance of your feelings without over-identifying with them. And here's an example of that. Recently, I was on the elliptical at the gym, and I had waken up really early, and I didn't want to be there. I almost talked myself out of going, but I was like, oh, fine, I'll go to the gym. And so I got on the elliptical, and I was doing this thing that I call a zombie crawl, which is whenever it's really early in the morning and I don't want to be at the gym, I don't want to be on the treadmill, and so I just kind of trudge in place. And I noticed at some point that my inner monologue was something like this. Ugh, I hate this. This is stupid. Why did I do this? This feels awful. This is too early. And I realized at some point that inner monologue isn't particularly helping me. And I kept thinking to myself, I can't do this. I should just go home. And so what I had to do instead when I noticed that was say, yeah, like this is a feeling I'm having and it's normal. It's normal to feel like you're struggling when it's 6:30 in the morning and you're at the gym and you're really tired and you're on the elliptical. It's normal to feel that way, but it's a feeling and it's going to pass. I'm confident and I'm capable and I'm proud of myself for being here. And I noticed once I mindfully accepted the feelings, but I didn't over-identify with them. And instead I was able to talk to myself in a more encouraging and compassionate way. I noticed that my energy level changed and I was able to finish strong in the workout instead of just doing the zombie trudge. Additionally, self-care is creating space in our life for joy. This is something I ask my clients in particular all the time. I'll ask them, what are you doing in a given day that makes you happy or brings you joy? And some folks, they have an answer straight out the gate. And they're like, man, I rode my bike to work this morning and that felt great. I felt wonderful in my body. I felt so accomplished, felt so good to move. And I just want to high five those folks. But most of us, when we're asked that question, our response is something like a blank stare and a question mark. We aren't super great about creating space in our life for joy. We're pretty good most of the time at maintaining a baseline, but we aren't super great about intentionally doing things that bring us joy or make us happy. Here's an example of that. I think that we are all pretty good at whenever we are quote unquote resting, what we will do is we will sit on our couches and stare at our phones. Here's the thing. I'm not opposed to staring at a phone. I do it myself a lot, but that's generally not something that brings us joy. That's generally something that keeps us at neutral. And so if you have a choice between staring at your phone and, going for a walk or calling up a friend or reading a book that's interesting to you or watching a YouTube video that's going to give you some ideas or inspiration, all of those things are going to get you above baseline more than just the staring at your phone. Having joy and meaning in our life sustains us and helps us stay motivated and in a healthy headspace. This is a really important thing that we want to build into our lives. And I want you to I want you to do a self-assessment here. What are the things that bring you joy? And are you intentional about building joy and play into your life? Play is so important. It helps us practice creativity. It keeps our minds healthy. It helps us learn problem-solving skills and how to regulate our emotions. It makes our lives feel more meaningful. It relieves stress, and it even improves our relationships. And so we really want to make sure we're being intentional about building that joy and that play into our life. Okay, so now we know what self-care is. We've got to talk about what self-care isn't, because there's so many common misconceptions that are out there that I want to make sure that we clear up today. So first of all, self-care must be foundational to our lives for our optimal functioning, and it is not selfish. Self-care actually helps us better care for others. If you think about it, self-care is what makes our work sustainable. And so if you want to do the most good you can over the course of your lifetime, you want to do everything you can to avoid burnout. And what that looks like is practicing self-care. So it's not selfish. And it's not selfish to treat yourself with care and nurture and respect. I don't know how we got that idea. And we are all deserving and worthy of care. So especially if you care about helping others, I think one of the best ways that you can show them that they are deserving and worthy of care is by showing them that you treat yourself as though you're deserving and worthy of care. Additionally, self-care is not self-indulgent. It's no more self-indulgent to practice self-care than it is to keep your gas tank filled up in your car. Nurture and care is the fuel we need to be good citizens, good spouses, good community members, just good people. And this idea that we should be able to do it all and never care for ourselves makes about as much sense as saying, my car needs to make it from Houston to New York and it's only getting one gas break and that's it. It needs to buck up and toughen up and make it all the way to New York. That's just not how it works. And so remember, nurture and self-care is fuel. It gives you the energy that you need. It's not self-indulgent. Additionally, self-care is not a reward for productivity or something that we earn. Listen, I'm not opposed to rewards for productivity. I think that they can actually be super helpful, but self-care can't be the cherry on top. Incentives are helpful for motivation, but it's not self-care. Remember, we're all worthy of kindness and nurture, even if we haven't produced anything. That's just part of what it means to be human, is to be worthy of care. And so don't make self-care something that you reward yourself with if you attain your goal, right? And so part of what that looks like is saying, oh, I will get that snack that I'm hungry for right now if I write 3 more pages. No, don't do that. If you're hungry, care for yourself and meet that need. Oh, I'll go to bed after I knock out these chores. No, go to bed because you need sleep. It's not a reward or something you earn. Additionally, and this is a big one, self-care is not aspirational or expensive. Self-care culture on Instagram can be so toxic. We talk about self-care as though it just means you're getting a regular manicure and pedicure, you have a skincare routine, you're getting your lashes done all the time, and if you aren't doing those things, then you're not practicing self-care. Listen, I'm not opposed to any of that, and I own more skincare products than I care to admit. And that can be part of your self-care routine, but be really aware when self-care is being co-opted to sell a product. It's not really self-care if you overdraw your bank account to buy the latest self-care athletic wear, right? It's also not self-care if you feel like you have to keep up with the Joneses in order to practice it. So by all means, have a good time. Periodically offer yourself little luxuries, but don't work yourself to death and then think that a pedicure on a Saturday morning is going to fix that, because that's not what self-care actually looks like. Additionally, self-care is not a lack of accountability. This is an interesting thing that comes up. There's this feeling, and I think it's tied to this idea that self-care is a reward for productivity or something we earn. There's this feeling that if we care for ourselves or are kind for ourselves, that means we're not self-disciplined or holding ourselves accountable. And again, I just think that's absolutely getting the cart before the horse. Self-care, meeting our basic needs, practicing self-compassion, that is foundational for us as we exist in the world, and that's not something that we earn. It's not indulgent, and it's not a lack of accountability if we screw up on something and then continue to practice self-care. That's just not how it works. Additionally, and this is feedback I get a lot anytime I talk to someone about self-care. Self-care can feel like another item on our to-do list. And I feel that, right? It is really hard to make it to the gym on a day that I have a million things going on. And just to be transparent, most of the time I probably don't make it to the gym on those days. It is really hard to plan nourishing meals for the week, or to go to the grocery store to get snacks if you're hungry, or to make sure that you call someone you love to talk to them about your emotions. It is really hard to do that, and all of that takes time. And so just a reminder, self-care should be foundational. It is the thing upon which we build everything else. And so we want it to be a priority, but it's okay to flex on self-care sometimes, right? Offer yourself compassion and regroup when necessary. There's certainly going to be days when you feel like you don't hit the mark when it comes to self-care, but remember that part of self-care is practicing self-compassion. So notice it, give yourself some compassion, and move forward and try again tomorrow. And something that I think is really helpful when it comes to self-care is this idea of an investment model, if you will, that self-care is an investment. It does take energy to practice self-care, but it gives back more than it takes. So compare this to things that take energy and don't give anything back. So for instance, if you're like, I'm going to work all night tonight, okay, you can do that. That's going to take energy, but you're also going to deduct that from your energy account, and you're not going to be able to perform at the level you want to perform at tomorrow, right? So that just takes energy, doesn't give anything back. And there's plenty of things that take no energy, but they give none back. And so if you're thinking about, I have an hour, should I read a book that I'm really interested in, that I find stimulating and interesting and engrossing, or should I sit on the couch and stare at my phone for an hour? It doesn't take any energy to scroll through Facebook or Instagram, but you also don't get any back. If you choose instead to read that book, that's something that can be energizing. It's something that can be stimulating and exciting. If you use that hour of time to call your mom or a friend, or spend time with your spouse or partner, those are things that, yes, they take energy, but you're going to get back more. It's going to pay dividends. And so I find it really helpful to think of self self-care as an investment. Yeah, it takes energy and it feels like another thing on the to-do list, but you will end up getting back more than you put in. And then finally, something I want to mention is that sometimes, and this is something I've seen, sometimes people use self-care as a means to avoid dealing with their emotions or dealing with things that are anxiety provoking. Sometimes I'll hear from clients, they will be really struggling with something, and honestly, they just need to sift through it and process it. And the response I'll get is something like, oh, well, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to take a bath instead, or I'm just going to go out with friends instead. There are some things that we need to face and we need to process. So don't use self-care as a means to avoid dealing with your emotions. Sometimes self-care means looking something challenging in the eye. It may feel like self-care some days if you're feeling overwhelmed by a task to put it off till tomorrow, but that's actually not caring so much for your future self. So be aware that you're not using self-care as a means to avoid things that make you feel anxious. And remember, the heart of self-care is making sure your needs are met and you are nurturing yourself with compassion and respect. Self-care can be a moving target, and that is actually a really good thing. Sometimes self-care, like I was just saying, sometimes taking care of yourself may look like working late to finish up a project. We're all gonna have days like that, right? Other times it may mean leaving work an hour early to get some much needed relaxation and connection time with your family. The heart is asking yourself what you need most in any given moment, instead of creating a one size fits all for all time answer. And so self-care really requires you to look inward and check in with yourself and say, hey, what is it I need right now? Do I need to lean in, or do I need to take a break? And again, on different days, that answer is going to be different. But the heart of it is making sure your needs are met. All right, so self-care is incredibly important for anyone who is helping someone else. That could be a parent, a caregiver, a volunteer, or just someone who's trying to be a good friend or family member. Self-care is maybe doubly important if you have any relationships in your life where you're trying to make any sort of difference in the world. And so we want to talk about why it's especially important for helpers. So self-care protects you. So practicing good self-care helps you prevent burnout, have more energy, stay true to your values, make better decisions, and feel more fulfilled. Helping others must be sustainable, or else you won't be able to do as much good as you want to do. You've got to pace yourself. There will always be something that needs your attention, and our to-do lists are never going to be fully crossed off. For long-haul helping work, self-care is essential. And so it's this idea of the investment model. If you care about helping others, if you care about making a difference, then you have to practice self-care in order to make that work sustainable. Otherwise, you might do some really intense stuff for a short period of time and then turn back and never look at it again. Additionally, I'm convinced a lot of poor decision-making is done by people lacking self-care in their lives. It impacts our judgment and makes us less anchored to our values. I know if I am sleepy or hungry or stressed out, I'm a much less nice person. And that makes me not as good of a helper. It makes it harder for me to enjoy the work I'm doing and find meaning in it. Self-care helps us practice gratitude and stay aware of the things that feel meaningful in the present moment. And so it can make this experience of helping more sustainable and more fulfilling over time. Additionally, self-care protects others. I hope you're picking up that one of the themes of this is that self-care is not selfish. In fact, self-care is essential if you are ever dealing with other people. It protects them from you being stressed out and overloaded. Practicing good self-care helps you prevent resentment toward those you care for. Resentment, by the way, is prevented by healthy boundaries. I often tell people that when we set boundaries, it's not just for us. They don't just protect us, it also protects others from our resentment. For instance, I have particular office hours, and I do have some evening appointments, but I don't see clients really ever past 7 o'clock at night. And the reason for that is if I'm seeing a client at 9 o'clock at night, I'm going to resent the heck out of them, and they don't deserve that. Right? That would be a problem that I created when I am saying yes to something that I shouldn't say yes to. And they would have to deal with the implications of me not having healthy boundaries and resenting them for having a session late at night. Again, that's not on them, that's on me. And so me having healthy boundaries protects others from me resenting them. And it helps us approach each other on more of an equal and open playing field. Additionally, if you care about helping others, then you want to model healthy behaviors. And I think it's so powerful to model for people what it looks like to practice self-care. Be that person in your office who takes their vacation days. Goodness gracious, what a cultural sea change if you model that for the other people in your office. If you are maybe a manager and you show your team what it looks like to prioritize your family, if you show them what it looks like to take a mental health day, if you show them what it looks like to have a standing therapy appointment once every couple of weeks, all of those things are going to show the people that you help that they are also empowered to care for themselves. So modeling healthy behaviors protects others as well. Self-care also helps us stay ethical and fair in our decision making. That if we aren't practicing good self-care, again, it can build up some of that resentment, which can make us very unfair. And also, for instance, if we're not caring for ourselves, if we're not sleeping, we're not moving, we're not eating, we're not nourishing our bodies, it's hard to stay connected to our values and stay ethical. We need our wits about us to live an ethical and value-laden life. And so that really helps us stay on track instead of wandering off into some territory that doesn't reflect our values. Additionally, practicing self-care, it helps us have a stronger ability to empathize with others, which is so incredibly important if you're dealing with other people. It helps us connect with them on that deeper level. If we are so drained that we can barely manage ourselves, we are not going to be able to be super aware of what's going on with other people. And then finally, self-care is going to help us continue helping others for longer, which I think is ultimately absolutely a win. So remember, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Make sure to put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. And if you are in this work for the long haul, self-care is absolutely essential. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you have any questions, I would love to take those from you guys. Feel free to check out my website at www.memorialheightscounseling.com. If you have any questions about this presentation or mental health more generally, or if you're interested in scheduling an online appointment, you can visit that website and fill out my appointment request form. I'd love to hear from you. All right. So I hope you go forth and you treat yourself with care and nurture in a new and profound way. Thanks for tuning in.